Welcome, everyone. My name is Ray Reagans. I'm a faculty member in the Work and Organization Studies group here at MIT Sloan. I'm also the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. As you know, we've been doing a considerable amount of work in this space, but in my opinion, by far, this is one of the best things that we're doing. So thank you, Malia and Fiona, for this amazing platform for hearing incredible voices. And so now I'll pass it over to my good friend and colleague, Fiona Murray.
Great, thank you very much. And hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's conversation on the inclusive innovation economy. My name's Fiona Murray. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, and along with Ray Reagans, I'm the Associate Dean for Innovation and Inclusion here at MIT Sloan. Leading our discussion today is going to be Malia Lazu, a colleague and a great friend at MIT, who's the person leading and sharing her experience with us throughout many of our DEI engagements. On behalf of Malia, Ray, and myself, we so appreciate all of you who've chosen to join us here at MIT School of Management for what has been a really exciting series of action-oriented conversations on building an inclusive innovation economy. We've already understood so much more than we did when we started these discussions about the structural and systemic inequalities in finance, in education, and entrepreneurship through our different speakers and our conversations. But as well as listening and learning, we're all about actions and action plans. And for those of you who've been with us in this conversation since the start of the academic year, thank you. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. And by way of very quick motivation, as you can imagine, much of our work at MIT is about creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community here on campus, where we focus on going from unconscious bias to really conscious inclusion. Obviously, much of that is inward looking, but it's incredibly important to us because we know that at MIT, we have a great responsibility to explore our role in the wider innovation economy. We want to understand how we can contribute better, how we can play a more productive and inclusive part in making that innovation economy more inclusive. And we want to listen and learn to those facing some of the most significant challenges so we can be partners in problem solving. So we're here to partner, we're absolutely here to learn. Just a few quick reminders. Each session is an opportunity for us to deep dive into different ways of understanding inclusion and contributing to inclusion in the innovation economy, and think about the action steps that we all need to be taking together. We hope this is also a chance to build a broader community of inclusive, innovative leaders. And I just want to note that this conversation includes alum, staff, students, faculty, and those from well beyond our boundaries, well beyond the walls of this institution, out into the community. And that's incredibly important for us. And now, the moment that you've all been anticipating and why I know so many of you are here, the chance to introduce our guests, three extraordinarily accomplished mayors, all the first Black women to hold that role in their respective cities, and three individuals who lead places, cities, whose role in the US innovation economy is absolutely undisputed, but where inequality also looms large. So who have incredibly important agendas and who we want to learn from and act in support of. So Mayor Breed, Mayor Lightfoot, Mayor Janey, thank you for joining us. We're so delighted and honored to have you. And Malia, over to you for the formal introductions. And thank you to you for bringing this conversation together.
Fiona, thank you so much. Those of you who have been with us on this journey know that whether I am a banker, an entrepreneur, or a lecturer at Sloan, I see myself as a community organizer. And I'm going to try to not get emotional during this conversation, but I ask for the generosity to be able to enjoy this moment as a Black woman, seeing three Black women not only being mayors, but being mayors of major economies in this country. They are key to our rebuilding, and I couldn't feel more comfortable having them in charge. So it is my pleasure to first introduce our latest woman to the club, Mayor Kim Janey. Mayor Kim Janey is the 55th mayor of Boston. She was the first woman and first Black mayor in the city's history on March 24th, 2021, which is exactly the day that she got this invite. Mayor Janey is leading Boston through the COVID-19 pandemic with a citywide agenda for recovery, reopening, and renewal. Mayor Janey's pandemic recovery priorities include distributing vaccines effectively, returning children to school safely, and centering disadvantaged workers and businesses in the city's economic recovery. Mayor Janey is committed to ensuring that the city of Boston reopens safely, equitably, with relief and renewal in every neighborhood. It's next my pleasure to introduce Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is the 56th mayor of Chicago. Since assuming office following her historic election, Mayor Lightfoot has undertaken an ambitious agenda of expanding opportunity and inclusive economic growth across Chicago's neighborhoods and communities, with early accomplishments including landmark ethics and good governance reforms and worker protection legislation, followed by key investments across education, public safety, financial stability, racial equity, and neighborhood investment. In response to the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis, Mayor Lightfoot has led a coordinated citywide response across government, business, and community organizations to effectively address its public health and economic impact through the creation of a racial equity rapid response team, the COVID Recovery Task Force, along with other actions. And last, but surely not least, is Mayor London Breed, a native San Franciscan raised by her grandmother in Plaza East Public Housing in the Western Addition neighborhood. In June 2018, Mayor Breed was elected to be the first African-American woman and second woman in San Francisco's history to serve as mayor. She was reelected for her first full 4-year term in November 2019. She is leading San Francisco's ongoing response to COVID-19 with a focus on equity, supporting the city's economic recovery. Earlier this year, Mayor Breed announced her vision to fundamentally change the nature of policing in San Francisco and issued a set of policies to address structural inequity. Since becoming mayor, she has focused on helping the city's homeless population into care and shelter, adding more housing for residents of all income levels, helping those suffering from mental health and substance use disorder on San Francisco streets, ensuring that all San Franciscans have access to a thriving economy, and making San Francisco cleaner and safer. Mayors, we welcome you. And I just have to give you a round of applause. Yay! We just want to jump in. I mean, in even reading your bios, we see the leadership that you all have to take at this moment. And I'd love to start with Mayor Lightfoot in really just helping us understand all of your cities are known as innovation hubs. Can you help us understand what are the policies and efforts that you're doing to support inclusion of, inclusion in the innovation economy?
Sure, and again, I will also just say what a privilege it is to be with my fellow sister mayors. And London, I think, is the dean of the three of us, and has really led in an incredible way. You know that COVID-19 hit San Francisco earlier than it did other parts of the country. We all looked to London and the things that she was doing with her public health department and really taking bold action to keep people safe. So I just got to give her a little love and a shout out. And Mayor Kim, as I said earlier, welcome. We are here to embrace and love and support you in any way we can. Boston's so important to our nation, and we want to do everything we can to help you be successful. But let me get to your question, and I've thought a lot about this. You can't get to an innovation economy, and you really can't do anything around equity and inclusion without doing, I think, 3 things. Number 1, embracing the value unapologetically. You've got to use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to embrace it, and that's exactly what we've done. People now know they can't come to talk to me about anything related to our city, and particularly not our economy and innovation, without telling me what their plan is for equity and inclusion. And then you've got to be, not only say it, you've got to do it. You've got to be intentional and dogged in pursuing equity and inclusion everywhere. And then you've got to, once you step back and think about, well, how do we execute this and operationalize it? You got to think about, how do you look at what are the barriers to access? What are the barriers to access for entrepreneurs of all types? What are the barriers to access to employees and getting a pipeline? So you've got to operate on all those levels, but having a mayor say it is not nearly enough. You've got to convince everybody on your team, up and down, the decision makers buried in the bowels of departments that really are where the rubber meets the road, to embrace this value and then hold them accountable with real metrics around making sure that they are operationalizing your values. But you've also then got to take it to the business community to open up pathways, and always lead by example. You noted some of the things that we did even over the course of the pandemic. We put over $100 million into small and micro businesses to help them survive through the pandemic. We know that for women and minority-owned business, one of the biggest challenges that they face is access to capital still in 2021. So we put together a fund that helps them bridge those divides if they are unbanked or don't have the kind of banker relationship that would open them up to lines of credit and so forth. So I think that while government can't solve all problems, we do have a unique role to lead by example and also to be a convener of a lot of different resources in a community and set the course and challenge people to think outside of their own comfort zones. And you've got to do that, particularly when it comes to equity and inclusion.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. And Mayor Breed, I'd love to bring you into this, and especially around this idea of discomfort and the role of the mayor in helping maybe alleviate some of that discomfort. But please tell us about, how you're thinking about San Francisco and innovation and what the city can do.
Well, the city, from day one, since I've been mayor, I made it clear to all department heads and people who are part of what makes San Francisco run and work that equity has to be at the forefront of what we do. And when we talk about equity, it can't just be, well, we know the data, we know what the data says, and then we're going to make investments, and the investments aren't necessarily relevant to what the data says. And I'll give you a perfect example. San Francisco has less than 6% African-American population. We have almost 40% of the homeless population are African-American. And when we look at the housing inequities in terms of who's accessing housing, we're talking about not even 3% of all the new affordable housing developments are even accessed by African-Americans. So there's a huge disparity around equity as it relates to access to affordable housing, and that's just with the homeless population. That's not with the general population. When you look at the fact that the average area median income for African Americans are about, 31,000 a year compared to 116,000 for whites in San Francisco. So there are a lot of disparities that exist. And so when I talk to my teams, because everyone's used to the bureaucracy, everyone's used to following certain procedures and policies as it relates to what the laws say, and providing fairness in the law, but the fairness in the law does not necessarily equate to changes in the outcomes as it relates to equity. And so that's why I've been very clear. When I talk about disparities, I've been very clear about what we have to do as a city to make those kinds of investments in a community that's disproportionately overrepresented in a lot of the high school dropouts, in the housing inequities, the income inequities, homelessness, criminal justice system. This is why when we were having conversations about resources, we took the $120 million, moved it from law enforcement agencies to deliberately invest in the African-American community specifically to change outcomes. Universal income policies, the Abundant Birth Project, providing $1,000 a month additional resources to mothers who were representing less than 6%, less than 4% of the births in San Francisco, but over 50% of the paternal deaths. And so we really have some major disparities, and we do need to start making the direct investments, and not just to agencies, but to people. Changing what's happening with their financial situations will change the ability for folks to take care of themselves, have access to healthcare and some of the things that we all hold dear, and hopefully make a difference in what we're seeing in a place like San Francisco. I want to see change. That's most important to me, because I want to look back on my time and know that people who've had similar upbringing like I did in public housing. I lived in public housing over 20 years of my life, where my grandmother raised me, not just a few years. It was like my whole life. And I want to see the changes happen for those communities that are different than they've ever happened before. So that's what being equitable is all about, is real change and real investments.
Absolutely. And what I'm really struck by is the holistic approach that both of you spoke to about, you don't get to inclusion by just including, right? You get to inclusion by systems changes and the things that that really need to change our systems. And that's a lot about what we explore here. We talk a lot about lost Einsteins and the folks who don't get to make it to our doors, but should be here. And that's something that's very important to us. So Mayor Janey, I'd like to pull you into this conversation now. And I know you're only a couple of weeks in the job, but this job isn't new to you as far as making sure that economies are inclusive and holding city governments accountable. So I have to say, as a Bostonian, as a resident of 02119, it is an honor to ask you, Mayor Janey, how are you thinking about the innovation economy in Boston?
Thank you so much. And first, I have to just give you all the kudos in the world, Malia. Just amazing to be here with you. Like you, started my career in community organizing. And so now to be here among these great women, my sisters in service, as the first Black mayor and the first woman mayor after 199 years. Is just incredible. And so huge shout out to Mayor Lightfoot and Mayor Breed. I am just so grateful, honored, and proud to join you. Boston is an amazing city. It's a world-class city. It's a city that raised me. I love this city. We lead in terms of healthcare, having the best hospitals, having the best universities, the birthplace of public education. Wonderful city, but Boston has not worked for everyone. We know, just like Mayor Breed talked about the disparities in San Francisco, here in Boston, there is a wealth gap, a huge wealth gap, where the households for Black families and the households for white families, we see almost $250,000 gap. White households at $247,500, where the net worth for Black households is $8, not 8,000, $8. And so we know that is because of policies. And so to your point, Malia, the need to have systems change, work through the policy, our laws, very, very important. Discriminatory laws have gotten us here with this wealth gap, and we need policies to help get us out. Here, very important, I have long advocated for more inclusion and equity in how the city itself does business, even before the last 2 weeks when I became mayor. And we know that with the $2.1 billion that the city spends to do business, less than 1% have been going to Black business or Latinx business. So we have a responsibility and obligation to do things differently here from the city government perspective. But again, as Mayor Lightfoot said, it is not just all on city government. We have to lead by example, but we need for our business leaders and the business community to do their part and make sure that they have more inclusive practices. Here we are putting our money where our mouth is. As mayor, I am investing $750,000 to ensure that we can support this work. We are building our own capacity within the city. I've hired or brought on or appointed a new chief for our Office of Equity and Inclusion to lead this work. Important to point out, though, every single city department has a role to play. It's not one city department that needs to do this work. We have invested in a team of folks who will be monitoring and making sure that in the city we are doing a better job. And we are asking our external partners to meet us here. There is so much innovation here in Boston, so many companies that want to locate, come here and relocate and set up their headquarters, which is great. But we need to make sure that this city is working for everyone and that we are continuing to build a pipeline so that kids that come up through Boston Public Schools who grew up with some of the same challenges that I faced growing up in this city have a real shot at sharing in the prosperity that is here in Boston.
So I wonder, Malia, if I can jump in. And so first, I just want to say it's an absolute privilege to join you, Malia, and mayors to be on this webinar with you and to learn from you as leaders and role models. As somebody who's been in this academic institution at MIT and had the privilege of being here for over 20 years, I know each of your cities has great academic institutions within the city and beyond, but in the hinterland of your city. What actions do you hope to see from our institutions, from us, that would really contribute in a meaningful way to inclusion and equity in our cities, in the innovation economy? We want to be better partners, and I think that you have the right to make requests and demands of us. And I would really love to understand how, what are the kinds of changes that you would like to see?
I'm happy to start. We're blessed here in Chicago to have really world-class universities. And what I would say is I think you've got to play both an inside and outside game. Inside, you really have to look internally at your institutions and understand what are the systemic barriers to the values that you say that you embrace. That's, I think, critically important. Again, it's not enough to just have a value statement. You've got to look through every single department, unit, and then who are the people that you're going to be relying upon to bring the kind of change that you want to see within your institution. I'll give you one example from us. One of the first things that I did as mayor was hire and empower the first ever chief equity officer here in Chicago for Chicago city government. Woman who was a Black woman, civil rights lawyer, and the work that she's been about is literally going department by department to help people understand the language of equity and inclusion, getting training done up and down the hierarchy within individual departments, and then empowering individuals within each of those departments to be her ambassadors, our ambassadors on equity and inclusion in the work. That's critically important. More to do, for sure. We've got to think about how we hire. I think the point that both Mayor Breed and Mayor Janey made about we procure $3.5 billion every year in goods and services. So we've done a lot of work around that ourselves. Same thing with colleges and universities. The pencils, the pens, the computers, the technology, all of those things are procured. Who are you using in your supply chain? And are you empowering women and people of color to do just that? So my point from before about intentionality, and then the outside game is all of you exist within a larger community. What are you doing to be good civic partners and embracing your neighbors? Are you hiring people from the communities that you are in? Are you using your academic work to help address and solve some of the larger problems in the urban environments in which you're in? All of these are important questions, and that's why I call it the inside-outside look. A lot of times, colleges and universities look outside and offer up pronouncements and theories about what the rest of us should be doing, but this is a look in the mirror kind of moment as well.
And I'll just add, I appreciate Mayor Lightfoot bringing up Office of Racial Equity that she has in Chicago. We have one here in San Francisco as well. And the goal is not to just have an office to say we have an office, but we can't say to everyone else in San Francisco, we expect there to be equity and not address the internal challenges with equity in our own departments. And so part of that is there have been a lot of very uncomfortable conversations. We've provided people a blueprint, all the city agencies, a blueprint that is just the basis for how they can understand equity and how they can implement changes in their policies within their departments, even with their promotions. It's a big, like when we look at San Francisco, and I'll just, be honest about what's happening even with our own workforce. The people who are laid off the most, African American. The folks who don't necessarily receive, a lot of promotions, African American. And so we have to be specific about that because it's not happening to all minorities. It's happening in some instances, mostly to African Americans. So when you look at that data, then it's important to investigate and to understand and to make changes, to adjust. And more importantly, I want to say, because USF, University of San Francisco, which unfortunately just had a challenging incident, but nevertheless, over the years, we have worked with them. I was a grad student at USF and connected them to the community I was working in, which was struggling with a lot of violence at the time. They created a whole program within their school that specifically focuses on outreach and equity, because I thought it was criminal that I grew up right down the street from USF and didn't really know it existed or understood its role in the community that it should have been involved in. And so they've been very intentional about changing that, about, working with the community, bringing in their students to tutor, engaging, developing programs and dialogues and conversations, and making it possible for kids who grow up in the city to have access to an institution like that. And not just once they graduate from high school, but before, to get them ready. And so I appreciate the work that they have done to try and make a change in enrollment, a change with the connection of their institution. It's been a very challenging thing to do, of course, but they're consistent. And that's the big issue. They didn't just say, we're coming in here today, we're going to be here for a year. It's just embedded in what they do as an institution. So I think that is important to make sure that it's not just, well, everyone's, marching and shouting and upset and finally really focused on this issue over the past year. It's like, okay, now that all the protests have died down and things have started to change, are we still really committed? What is our long-term strategy? The racism that has plagued this country has not just developed over a couple of years. This is, hundreds of years here embedded in our culture in a way that has been explosive in some instances. So how are we going to make a deliberate change that is embedded to the point where that can overtake some of the challenges that have been created as a result of systemic racism?
There it is. Boom. Yes, 400 years in the making. And so I would just add and build upon what has already been said, the importance of diversity and inclusion in your student body. We're talking about an innovation hub, and what can we do? We've got to build that pipeline. For too long, too many people who look like this panel here have been denied the opportunity. We have the best universities and colleges, some of the best in the entire country, and yet the students that graduate from our public schools have less opportunity and access to get into these colleges and universities. And there is a real opportunity, if we're intentional about not just diversifying our staff and our boards, but making sure that the student body is reflective of the diversity that we see in our cities, and that there are real opportunities to build this pipeline. We're talking about green jobs. Well, we got to make sure that there are people coming out of our public schools who can then fill those jobs if we're going to really be a true innovative innovation hub here in Boston.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And you've given us, I think a lot of the things you've talked about are things that we think about and try and act upon, but I think the way you frame it and this call to action is incredibly powerful, especially coming from the three of you. So thank you.
Yes,
Maria.
I know coming into MIT, one of the things that I truly love about our culture is that there is no here. We're very smart. We're here because we're accomplished. And so we're like, oh, do you need a new system? We'll create it. And what was so great is that we said at Sloan here, we're actually going to co-create it. We're going to create it with the people who have the ideas and who are actually smarter than us when it comes to how to make substantial change. And so I'd like to just sort of bring it back to your work in the cities. And I would love to hear, and Mayor Breed, maybe we'll start with you this time, is to hear about how you're looking at all of these funds that are being created both nationally and in cities to support minority businesses. Is this something that is encouraging for you? Do you hope it continues? Do you think it's not enough? Just how are the cities feeling about all of this new money coming in?
Well, I will say that I'm excited about the new money. I just want the money to be easier to get to the people that need it the most. I started the African American Revolving Loan Fund, which in some cases have turned into grants because we got a huge contribution from a private donor. Almost over $6 million of resources for Black businesses in San Francisco, which are almost non-existent, right? The first round took forever to get that money. It went through the city, so it was like a whole process and what it had to go through, because I set aside over $3 million or about $3 million, and I'm like, okay, let's get this to the businesses. They're struggling, the hair, the barbershops and all these places. I grew up with a lot of these people who own these places, and I'm like, if we don't get them some resources now, they are not going to exist anymore. And it took so long. It was insane. And when I got the philanthropic dollars, there was no way I was going to accept that as a gift to the city because it was so difficult to get money through the city. And so it went to a foundation to make it a lot easier. So as the point I'm making is, I'm making decisions about city resources, and also there's a lot of private dollars. And the private dollars have to be easier to access. And when I say easier to access, we have to trust Black people with money because we make it so difficult for people to access money. There, is an organization that has to have a fiscal sponsor here in San Francisco because, I messed up with about $60,000, and it's a Black organization. And we had to cover it, but we need to keep this organization going. But there's another organization that's going to get a grant for a building that's not a Black organization that messed up with like almost $300,000. And I can't reconcile in my head, here we are still trying to equate dishonesty and inability to manage our own money and our own decisions with Black people trying to do business. We say we want to help, we're pouring all these dollars, but we need an overseer. We need someone to oversee what these entities are doing. And so, I think it's great, but people need to trust Black people. When they say, why are you giving Black women $1,000 a month with no strings attached, who are women who are pregnant? And I'm like, they know what they need to do with their money. I don't have to tell them that they need to spend it on groceries for their kids or to take care of their health. We're doing this as a way to see how this can work in order to change the outcomes, because these are women who actually live in poverty, and they're going to choose other options if they don't have the additional resources they need to be able to choose probably the better option. But let's trust that they know how to make decisions for themselves. And we're also, of course, offering prenatal care and other resources and other support. But at the end of the day, we need to start getting the money directly in the hands of Black people, Black businesses, Black resources, and trust that they know what they're doing. And if you're not Black, stop trying to tell Black people what to do. So I'm happy to get it, be a good partner and an ally and support it. The person who gave me $2.5 million to support Black people, Black businesses, he said, well, Mayor, you know where it should go. You're Black, you know how this works. I'm not going to tell you what to spend it on. Here you go. And we were able to send that directly. We were able to forgive those $50,000 loans. They became $50,000 grants for these businesses, which have been really incredible during this pandemic.
Mayor Lightfoot or Mayor Janey, jump in. Because I know I was about to respond to Mayor Breed, like, yeah, and you know what else?
I was just gonna say mic drop, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I love most about London is she just unapologetic and tells it like it is, and that's exactly what we need to do. But I'm gonna follow in that vein and push back a little bit on the premise of your question. I'm gonna say, what money? You know, I watched all last summer and fall, every TV program, all these companies putting out these slogans. And again, pardon me if I'm just being who I am, which is incredibly candid, the We Love Black People campaign. Okay, where's the money? Put the money where your mouth is. So we, you know, as London said, we as mayors know what the needs are in our city. We know where the pain points are for our people. And we have done a lot by ourselves because we haven't had the support that I think we need from the federal government, from our state government. And I will say here in Chicago, at least, our corporate and philanthropic community has stepped up in really meaningful ways. But these national companies that are saying, oh, we're going to pledge $100 million over 10 years, bring it then. We can direct that money right now, today, to areas of our city that have been disinvested in. I shouldn't be by myself when I'm talking about investing $750 million in Black and brown neighborhoods, as we are doing through our signature economic development plan. Now, again, we haven't been, but that should be $2 billion because of the support that we're getting from all these companies who now say, oh yeah, we're now woke and we've now figured it out and we're now responsible for racist systems that hold people back, that have a red line and haven't banked on and on and on. So I'm all about people's consciousness raising, but I'm also about let's get something done. And we have done a lot to try to lead by example. I mentioned in passing our signature investment program. We call it Invest Southwest. And if you know Chicago, as I know some of you do, that means investing in Black and brown folks in areas of our city that haven't seen a dime of meaningful investment in decades. We, even through the pandemic, invested $70 million of city dollars last year. We got an ROI of private and philanthropic of $300 million and more to come. That's what I'm talking about. We have eliminated a lot of barriers that existed before to getting people access. And, you know, London talked about, let's turn this loan into an actual grant so people don't have to sweat trying to figure out how to pay it back. We've done that work as well. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges, and I'm an old procurement geek, I know that we can use the power of the money that we buy and procure goods and services with every year to be a game changer, to breaking down city contracts so that you don't have to have a $100 million line of credit. You can actually work on our projects, provide goods and services to us at a lower price point. And by the way, we've started taking efforts to make sure we pay people in a timely fashion. And aside from that, what we've also I just signed an executive order. All these companies that do business with the city and feel compelled to actually cut Black and brown and women businesses into the pie. What are you doing when you're not working for a government that requires MBE, WBE participation? So the first time ever, we are making people, as of July 1 of this year, tell us what your track record is in quote unquote supplier diversity. If you really are walking the walk, you won't have a problem telling your story. But if you're not walking the walk, then it gives us an opportunity and a measuring stick to make an assessment as to whether or not you share our values and whether we want to be doing business with you. So I believe that data and knowledge is power, and with data and knowledge, you can hold yourself accountable, but you can also hold others accountable. So I want to call the question and not just say, okay, I've seen this from this company. Put your money mouth is.
Right, where are the receipts? Right, where are the receipts? And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Mayor Lightfoot, and I'm gonna kick it over to Mayor Janey by saying, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're now back of the envelope, maybe looking at 50 billion, 60 billion that's been dedicated. Our economy's trillions, right? So what are we actually talking about? It still seems way cheaper than reparations. Mayor Janey, I know you're knee deep in this with Boston and with the promises that have been made throughout the city, but can you tell us around the funds and what you hope to see happens?
Absolutely. So definitely more investment. That is so key. And both mayors have touched upon that. And as Mayor Lightfoot just said, in terms of this We Love Black People campaign, I remember last summer as we were all kind of shut in with COVID, seeing kind of the world kind of wrap their arms around Black people through images on television. You can now watch Black movies and stream them. You can now see Black people on commercials. But the real question are, what are you doing to change the life of Black people who have been denied the opportunities for centuries? And so there is a responsibility that we all have to play, not just city government, in terms of doing the real work, making sure that the hiring is taking place at the decision-making tables. Who is at the table? It's been long said, if Shirley Chisholm, if they don't invite you to the table, bring a folding chair. Absolutely, indeed. I'm a big believer, let's build our own tables. But we need the resources to do that. And so it is definitely important that we call the question around the investment. What are we doing as a city, but what are our private partners doing, including our institutions? So important. When it comes to procurement, we have a lot of work to do here in Boston. I already talked about the $2.1 billion that's being spent, with less than 1% going to Black and Latinx businesses. And so we have to make that investment right in my community, my neighborhood, in Malcolm X Park. We are creating an opportunity there to do something different. We've got capital investment coming. We've increased that investment so that we can ensure more subcontracting can take place and that businesses owned by people of color have a real shot. And then we're making sure that we are investing in our supplier diversity programs to continue to build that pipeline. This is critical if we are going to change that $8 of median net worth for Black families in Boston and close that enormous wealth gap. We also have to focus on home ownership opportunities. We know COVID has been devastating, folks, in our city, all across our country. But the reality is, before COVID, we had, a housing crisis. We have an opportunity and achievement gap. We have people who have been left out of the prosperity to help folks stay in their homes. I've invested just in my first week in office, $50 million in new dollars for rental relief to help folks stay in their homes. But it's not enough to do the rental relief. We've got to help people own their homes. We've been denied that opportunity from redlining and other kind of discriminatory practices and policies here and throughout our country. And we've got to change that and make sure that there is real opportunity to build generational wealth. And so those are the things we continue to look at here in Boston and will be acting upon as I serve as mayor of our great city.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to, we have 14 minutes left. And I also know, mayors, if you can get out of here early, that won't be a problem for you. And so I want to respect that, that our Black lady mayors are busy. And as you can see, really not only leading their cities, but leading the country through their cities into our recovery. And so we don't have time to jump into audience questions and give those questions the respect they deserve. So I'm actually, before we do a formal closing and say goodbye, I'm going to ask Mayor Lightfoot and Mayor Breed to give Mayor Janey, our first Black woman mayor, a piece of public advice. I'm sure you have advice that you'll give her when you guys get to see each other in person, but a piece of public advice for our first Black woman mayor.
I'm happy to jump in. My guess is that Boston is probably a little more like Chicago, perhaps, than San Francisco. I think that the thing that I would say, and you know this, is just stay true to who you are. You have a vision, and make sure that your team understands it, that they're very focused on executing on your vision, and don't let the critics throw you off. The critics are everywhere. I keep a copy of Theodore Roosevelt's famous "Man in the Arena," which I call the "Woman in the Arena" quote. And the biggest takeaway, of course, is it's not the critics who count. No one will walk in your shoes like you do. No one's going to wear the weight and responsibility, but also the awesome opportunity that you now have as mayor, and the way in which you are going to set a different course for the history of your city just by virtue of who you are, where you come from, what your values are. The ripple effect across the entirety of Boston and the surrounding area will be significant. Do not underestimate your power and what you can do simply by your presence, and then even more by your works. You know, I'm a person of faith, and I believe what I think it's James, 2 James tells us, that faith without works is dead. You can't be a leader without leading and setting the course and holding people accountable, and being bold in this moment. You know, after the history of never having a person of color, never having a woman as mayor in the city of Boston, you have a blank canvas on which to paint. And we are all here to support you and excited about the prospects.
Well, I'll just add, because Mayor Lightfoot said it all. I'm super inspired now from her advice, so thank you. I would just say, add to that, don't do this job in fear of losing it. I say that because it's just like what Mayor Lightfoot said, you stay true to who you are, because you're going to have to make really hard decisions. And there are going to be some people who love you for it, and there are going to be some people who don't love you for it, right? And at the end of the day, you know, what does your gut tell you? What does your faith tell you? Why are you in this position in the first place? Never lose sight of that, because in the political arena, oftentimes you have to appeal sometimes in order to get elected to one group versus another. I refuse to do that. And I know Mayor Lightfoot has put her whole neck on the line when it came to opening schools in Chicago. I mean, look at her courage and how brave she was to say, you know what, this is about our kids. And so either you stand for something meaningful because this is why you're here, or you don't really deserve to be here. Either you're willing to put it all on the line because of your values and what you care about, or what's the point? What difference is it going to make? So I would just say that no matter what, there are going to be, you know, both sides of the table. Stay true to who you are. Be open-minded, listen to all parties, but listen to your advisors, but you know the right decisions to make. With all the advice you get, with the data, with whatever happens, do what you believe is the right thing to do. You think I wanted to close down a major city like San Francisco and have my tourism businesses and everybody else, I mean, our economy completely decimated? It was the last thing I wanted to do, but I had no choice. I had to focus my priorities on the data, on the science, and saving lives. I had to make the hard decision. And that's the roles that we play as mayors. We make the hard decisions mostly when no one else wants to. And no one knows what it's like to be in these positions more so than mayors. And nothing is a better network in this country than the mayors. Mayor Lightfoot, remember I showed your memes? They had, Mayor Lightfoot had a bunch of memes, and people were making life-size images of her. And it was just sharing that information, having a laugh, but also reaching out to one another and talking about the challenges that we face and looking for advice and finding out the way we did this. And she said that I was a leader in this COVID thing, but let me tell you, back in I think it was February, was it January? Mayor Lightfoot is calling me. Are we going to have to shut down the airports? Are we going to have to do this? And I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm going to the Super Bowl in Miami. So I don't know if we have to do it that quickly. I mean, I think it's coming. It's coming. It looks like it's coming. But, you know, so it's a great network of people. And, you know, when you don't know something or you're unsure, reaching out to fellow mayors is so critical to seeing how others do it. Your predecessor was very active with mayors throughout the country, and I think that will definitely serve you well.
Thank you, mayors. Mayor Janey, I'd like to give you a minute to respond.
Thank you. This has just been so incredible. I cannot wait for the opportunity to meet you and connect in person when it is safe to do so. So grateful to join you, my sisters in service, as a Black woman mayor and the first Black mayor and the first woman mayor for Boston, and the advice I take to heart. You know, trusting your gut has been advice that I have given to anyone who will listen. At the end of the day, you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and lay your head on your pillow and be able to rest well, knowing that you made the best decision for yourself and your community. That is how I have tried to live my life. I know I don't know everything and will certainly be turning to you as women who are doing this work, who are leading major cities and, more important, major change. Because it is very clear to me as I sit here in this historic moment in our city that we cannot go back to the way things were. To go back is that $8 of net worth for Black families. To go back are all the challenges that we have faced prior to this pandemic. And so as I focus on recovery, reopening, and renewal for our city, I am fighting for a better city, a more just city, a more resilient city, a more equitable city. And I believe Boston is ready for it. Don't listen to what they say on Saturday Night Live. We are ready to do this work, and we are going to go better than before. We are not going back to normal. We are going to go better. And I will definitely be turning to you each and the other mayors across our country for support and advice as we move our city forward here in Boston. Really grateful for the opportunity to connect with each of you, and certainly to MIT, Fiona, to Malia. Thank you for this amazing conversation that we hope leads to action from our partners across the river. Thank you so much for all that you do, and look forward to continuing to build with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And on that note, and as I bring us to a close, I am sorry that we weren't able to get to audience questions, but we needed to hear what these mayors had to say about the future of cities and of our country. And so thank you for taking the time, mayors, to join us. Mayor Janey, we do have a specific action. You know, Mayor Janey knows me enough to know I'm all about action. And Mayor Breed and Mayor Lightfoot, we offer the same to you, which is we are working with organizations throughout the city to figure out how to help with action plans and how to support with research. And we have some students who are going to be working with everyone from BECMA to Black Market to the LGBTQ Chamber here in Boston. And we would love to be able to share that work with you and with the city. So we hope we can follow up with you so that you can see how we're trying to support and redline it all up for us. And if there's ways we can play together. And the same goes to you. I'm not throwing shade on any of your universities, mayors. You have great ones. But if we can be helpful here, we look forward and we will be following up on that. So I'm going to say thank you and kick it over to, yes, Mayor Lightfoot.
Oh, no, I was just turning off so I could say thank you very much, and we will definitely take you up on your offer.
Wonderful, thank you. Fiona, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. All I want to say is thank you. Thank you for welcoming us actually into your conversation. It's an extraordinary opportunity to sit and be part of a conversation with you as the three mayors and Black women mayors of these extraordinary cities. and really your focus on leading by example, on taking action, but also inspiring, I think, all of us to want to take action together. Quite often, I think the way the story is told of the extraordinary innovation economy that we have in our cities and across the United States is a story about government getting out of the way. But in fact, I think what you've reminded us of is that government, and particularly mayors and cities and city organizations and the city government, play such a powerful role in bringing the key stakeholders in the innovation economy together, and in calling us all to action, whether it's large corporations, our universities, banking, risk capital, and entrepreneurs. And so we absolutely want to be at that table together, inspired by your presence and by your voices. So thank you again, and we absolutely look forward to contributing to real action.
Thank
Amelia.
you.
Amelia, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, mayors, for joining us.